Hi, everyone. I guess we'll get started with today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. And as you jump on the webinar today, my name is Tyson MacInnis. I'm the Regional Innovation Director for CFIN for Atlantic Canada. And it's great to have our discussion today on sustainability in food. Obviously, that's a big and broad topic, and we could cover that from a lot of different angles. And today we'll take one aspect of it. Certainly what we're seeing with the innovators in our network is that there are all kinds of solutions being developed that have an aspect of sustainability in mind as part of their value prop these days, whether it's a byproduct valorization, upcycling kind of solution, packaging solutions, looking at tracking inputs, waste reduction, et cetera. There's all kinds of new innovations that are coming out to help the sector. And I'm sure in the future, some of our future webinars will probably profile some of those innovators. Today, the tack we're going to take is look at it from the perspective of the food manufacturer themselves and how are they tackling this issue. And we have a great panel with us today that's going to help us have that conversation and talk about some real practical insights from what they're seeing as they walk the floor and have conversations with food manufacturers right across the country. So I'm very excited today to have three great panelists. I'll introduce you in a second. Before I do that, if you're looking for French translation or another language preference, our worldly translation is in the chat, so you can feel free to access that and help you along the way. As well, we have a poll question just asking you about your background. So if you're able to kind of complete that, that gives us some indications of the people that are joining our webinars and where their background is, and that's really appreciated. So thank you for that. So before I turn it over to introduce well, I guess actually we should probably introduce our panelists now. It's great to we have Dave Fox from Quantify Environmental, we have Brett Willis from CarbonOne, and we have Mats van Kleef from Enviro-Stewards. And maybe to start off, guys, we'll start with Dave, then Brett, then Mats. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company. I know you could probably talk for 20 minutes on that, but if you could do a quick snapshot, that would be wonderful. So Dave, on to you.
Thanks, Tyson. Appreciate it. Really happy to be here. Great group to be with. And first off, just want to thank CFIN. Been a really great support over the last 2 years across Canada with a lot of different food and beverage manufacturers, projects we've done with them. Quantify Environmental is a company that brings unprecedented visibility to your production. So you may have heard terms out there like EMIS, energy management systems, Industry 4.0, industrial IoT. What we do is we install hardware, software at your facility, full turnkey solution. So you can see all of your utility streams, all your production streams, each and every piece of equipment on a live unified platform, which is browser based. So you can access it anywhere outside of the plant or inside. And the whole point of this is so that you can see what your plant is using at all times. It's kind of the new age version of, what would have been audits in the past. You can now see in real time, how much water are you using? What's the vibration on a machine? We see that you get ROIs within 6 months as soon as you can see your factory in this manner. So we install that, and then we work with you monthly to ensure that you're looking at the data, your team's acting on the data, and you're getting the savings that you should be. Some other cool features is it can do real-time GHG tracking and any other KPI or metrics that your team is looking for. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Brett?
Excellent. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Tyson and the team at CFIN for the invite to be part of the webinar today. It's always great to be part of your events there. So Brett Willis, co-founder, CEO at CarbonOne. CarbonOne is a Canadian technology company focused on decarbonizing the agri-food value chain. We make it highly efficient and very cost-effective for food and beverage manufacturers to measure, report, and reduce carbon emissions. Mats, over to you.
Thanks, Brett, and thanks, Tyson and the CFIN team for making this possible. My name is Mats van Kleef. I'm an engineering director at Enviro-Stewards, and our mission is to cultivate resilient business and improve lives in extraordinary ways. And we do that by finding the root cause of issues that reduce operating costs. So similar to what Dave mentioned about installing sensors, to really dig into a process and understand what's happening on a minute by minute level. And that helps reduce operating costs, but also at the same time, reduce environmental impact. And we've done that with large clients like Unilever and Cargill, Pepsi, and Bimbo Bakeries, and many more. But we're also an award-winning B Corp. So we want to do this kind of work as a force for good in addition to being profitable. And through that network of B Corps, we find many companies that are motivated to do this work, kind of in that same vein, who realize that climate action is needed, and that's becoming increasingly urgent. And me personally, I lead the development of our software platform, which is called Stewie, our system for tracking energy, water, and waste improvements. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation to see kind of the new advancements and to share that with you guys. And where there's funding available to help implement those kinds of opportunities in your facility.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So in terms of our format for today, we're going to hand things over to Brett here in a second. And then after that, we'll have a bit of a conversation, ask some questions. And as we're watching and listening, if some questions come to mind, please feel free to add them in the chat. And later on, Lavina from our team will join us and help with sharing some of those questions with the panel today. So Brett, just to kind of set the stage for today, can you share with us, maybe give us some perspective with a bit of a presentation on the business case for sustainability and what you're seeing with industry these days?
You bet. Just gonna share my screen here. All good there. Hopefully it's not, let me know. Yeah, thanks, Tyson. So again, hello everyone there. Really excited to hear what Mats and Dave have to share today. I know they've got some really good stuff to share with you. But before we get into that, just sort of set the stage and put some context here. I wanted to start off speaking a little bit about what I see as a need to reframe the discussion around sustainability again here. So, over the past 8 to 9 months, I would say, what we've been seeing is what I'll call a shift in attitude towards sustainability, at least publicly. And, I think we all know, what's causing that or who is causing that. And, part of that, I think, is also coming from how we've been talking about sustainability over the past 4 to 5 years. And what I've seen over the past 4 to 5 years is a shift away from talking about sustainability from a business perspective and really focusing on, the environmental impacts and the environmental performance, the social impacts and social performance. And, I think in times like these, we need to reframe the conversation again to align to, business objectives. And, I think the good news here is that sustainability isn't going anywhere, folks. Regardless of what you may be hearing from some folks and some outlets, sustainability is not going anywhere. Sustainability is no longer just an environmental and social imperative. It is truly an economic mandate. And the reason behind that is the strong business case for sustainability. I just wanted to refresh and remind people of that business case because it has sort of shifted or altered over the last couple of years there. So when I talk about sustainability business case, and I've been asked to talk about it quite a bit lately, I really talk about 4 drivers, or what I call the 4 pillars of the business case for sustainability. And the first one is really about how it is such a powerful lever to drive top line growth. And there's a number of different reasons for that. What we're seeing globally is we're seeing global trends toward increasing regulations around sustainability, particularly things like climate. We're seeing them in different shapes and forms, such as mandated climate disclosures across the world. We've been working on one here in Canada, but, Europe is much farther ahead than we are. Asia Pacific is really, increasing speed. And despite what you might be hearing from our friends down south, while things aren't happening at the federal level, certainly at the state level, things are accelerating from a regulatory perspective. So, with the fluidity of, what's happening in trade right now, rumor has it that, many food and beverage companies are looking to diversify their export markets. And, and if you're looking over to places like Europe and Asia and other places across the world, this sustainability stuff is no longer a competitive advantage. It's no longer a differentiator. It really has become table stakes. You're not going to get a ticket to the game. You're not going to get access to these markets if you're not doing sustainability and disclosing your performance there. But even beyond the regulatory pressures, whether they're mandated disclosures or otherwise, I think what we're seeing is a big driver from the market itself. So, whether that's, consumers asking for this stuff or your customers asking for this, and that includes the retailers, right? So even here in Canada, the major grocery retailers, Loblaws, Sobeys, Metro, they are steadfast in their commitments towards sustainability, right? Whether it's on the climate stuff, whether it's on the packaging and plastics and the golden design rules, they are really, committed to this. And when it comes to things like for climate, for example, the three major retailers are requiring suppliers to not only measure emissions and disclose them, but set science-based targets by 2027 and 2028, which start to become due in 2030, right? So, it really is becoming table stakes here and with our customers, consumers. And, it's important to be able to align and meet those expectations of our customers and our other stakeholders there. Beyond the top line stuff of market drivers and regulatory drivers, what we also see is a very clear correlation between sustainability and innovation, right? So whether that's innovation of internal processes or innovation when it comes to things like product development, sustainability can really be a strong driver for innovation. So you sort of couple all of those things together, and sustainability is a very powerful lever to drive top line growth. Beyond that, sustainability really does strengthen margins. And in an industry where we're operating on razor thin margins, anything that we can do to strengthen our margins, is going to be beneficial. And again, it does that in a few different ways. So, at the end of the day, when you're addressing the sustainability stuff, and particularly on the environmental side of things, right? When we're addressing our environmental performance, what we're really addressing are our cost centers. So when you look at things like carbon or climate, what drives carbon emissions is all of your inputs, right? It's fuels and energy and electricity and our ingredients and our packaging and our transportation. So if we can improve those things, yes, we do get improved environmental performance, but we also drive down our costs, which strengthens our margins. And the beautiful thing about this is not only do we realize the direct cost savings. And I know that Mats and Dave are going to talk a little bit more about this in detail. They're really the experts on this piece here. But not only do we get the immediate cost savings today, and oftentimes with very attractive ROIs, not only we get those immediate cost savings today, but we also protect ourselves against future price increases. Because let's face it, things are not getting any cheaper, right? Whether it's fuels, whether it's ingredients, packaging materials, whatever it may be, the cost of things are going to continue to go up. So, by really diving in and focusing on improving our sustainability performance today, we do realize those cost savings today, protect us against, future price increases in the future, which really helps to strengthen our margins and build that business case. And, I'm sure as Mats and Dave will share, we don't need to be spending, huge amounts of capital to get started. There's lots of quick wins. There's lots of low-hanging fruit that are low cost and no cost that we can get started with, and then, eventually move and advance to some of the more sophisticated solutions there. Beyond that, what we're really seeing is that a focus on sustainability is really widening your access to capital. Whether it's from an investor perspective, from, the banks, any of the lenders, what we see is that the folks who control the flow of capital understand the business case for sustainability and they're flowing capital to those organizations that are taking action in this area, right? So, again, whether it's from, an investor perspective, from a lender perspective, what we're seeing at banks is banks are now, requiring, sustainability disclosures, climate disclosures, just to access certain financial instruments. They're tying the interest rates on loans to ESG and sustainability performance. So not only do you get that top line growth and those stronger margins, but it also widens your access to capital to be able to support that growth over the longer term there. And I think what we're going to see going forward is we're going to see an increase in these requirements. And we're also going to see, hopefully, an increase in support and incentives around different sustainability initiatives. Now, if that is not enough, if those three things, if driving top line growth, if strengthening your margins and widening access to capital is not enough, don't worry, because there's a stick, right? And what we know is that the screws around regulations related to sustainability, whether it's on the environmental side, the climate side, food waste, packaging, plastics, or even on the social side of things, the screws around these regulations and compliance requirements are not getting any looser, right? So, whether it's, regulations or requirements around mandated disclosures, around, Bill C-59 and, this greenwashing regulation, it's really becoming increasingly important, to be focusing on these things. And when we're not only do we lose out on those benefits that I just talked about, but we're opening up our business to major risks, right? And those risks are coming in many different shapes and forms. Those risks could be anywhere from brand and reputational risks to, regulatory risks that come with certain fines and penalties. And what we are increasingly seeing, and don't shoot the messenger here, but what we're increasingly seeing is legal and litigation risks, right? So when we look at all of these things, there is very clearly a very strong business case behind sustainability that has evolved over the past few years. And I think now it's more important than ever that we make sure that we've reframed the conversation to align with business objectives and making sure that we're talking about sustainability in the language of business so we can continue to get the support and the resources that we need to be able to drive things forward. So I'll sort of stop it there and happy to take any questions, but Tyson, I'll pass it back over to you and look forward to hearing what Mats and Dave have to share.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. And that was a great overview. Sets a good foundation for today's chat and certainly gives some extra talking points for people like Dave and Mats when they're out talking to clients for sure. I was intrigued. I mean, the bottom line, top line, the access to markets, I get that. The bottom line for sure. I wasn't thinking of access to capital as much as being something that wouldn't even been on my radar to consider. And then certainly there's the compliance piece. I'm wondering, Dave and Mats, from your perspective, on the ground, talking to food companies, what are you hearing food companies say when they either contact you or you reach out to them in terms of why they might be interested in pursuing some work in this area?
Thanks, Dave. And thanks. Good question, Tyson. I think we hear a lot of the points that Brett mentioned. Some are getting surveys from retailers, and there's kind of pressure from downstream the supply chain to make sure that companies are starting to reduce emissions. And just that visibility even is already a trigger for some companies to take the initiative and start making progress towards being impactful that way. Many are doing it just flat out for the cost reduction and improving operating expenses. So that's a really, really common one. And really the motivation in the end, can come from many different angles, as many different as the number of clients that we work with. But the outcome is often the same, whether you're doing it for the altruistic reasons of environmental impact or social impact or cost reduction. The more you reduce, the more you make your business more resilient. It makes reporting easier if you have better insight into the data. And even to the level of job security, it might not necessarily be competition between companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, but even if management decides to close a single plant within their organization, being more competitive within your organization also leads to better job security. So there's a host of reasons, from operations and maintenance staff to senior management, for companies to engage with this kind of work.
Thanks, Max. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I'd agree with Matt's. Those bigger picture issues of, our customers are asking this, management is asking this. We hear that, and then kind of take it down to the next granular level that typically gets passed to someone in their organization. And if it comes to something like electrical use or water use, and their mandate is, well, now we need to report our GHG emissions, we need to report how much electrical we're using, they realize that, oh, all we have right now is monthly bills or nothing at all. They have no visibility on their plant floor. So how do you get to that point where you now need to report it, but you have no data on how to report it? So, it's those specific pain points that we get calls from. The city's after us for certain water use and water quality issues. I have no data to come to that conversation with. I need that visibility. Or like Matt's is saying, we have this mandate, we need to report how much electricity we're using. If you only have a monthly bill, we typically get calls from individuals and say, look, I need to now see my electricity on a granular level, and I need to start reporting all these different KPIs, or I need to show it as an equivalent GHG emission, and my scope 1 and scope 2 on site. So those are my specific pain points that I, as an individual at this corporation, need to satisfy.
Thank you. And you mentioned scope 1 and scope 2, and I don't want to get into a big conversation on that, but I'm wondering if someone would like to provide just a really brief commentary. Yeah, Brett, maybe on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 for anyone that's new language for.
Yeah. Scope 1, very simply, it's the emissions, direct emissions that come from your facility. So things like use of natural gas for heating, refrigerants, any fuels used on site. The technical definition is emissions from company-owned or controlled assets. Scope 2, very simply, electricity usage. In some rare instances, purchased steam, but typically just emissions from electricity usage. And then scope 3 is everything else. So scope 3 is your emissions from across the entire value chain. So for a food and beverage company, it's everything from the emissions come from growing your ingredients, the emissions coming from, the extraction of raw materials for your packaging, transportation, employee commuting, business travel, those types of things. So scope 1 and 2, your facility, scope 3, your value chain.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that quick recap. That's perfect. I'm also curious about, as much as there's companies reaching out to you, being proactive or being reactive because they're being faced questions about the sustainability of their operations and need to get their head around it. What are some of the barriers you find when you're reaching out to companies? The world of running a food company is one of the biggest juggling acts you can ever have, and especially if you're on the operations side as well, the amount of fires you're putting out, et cetera. So I can imagine taking on another kind of project or task can be a bit of a challenge. So curious what kind of barriers you find sometimes.
Yeah, I can jump right on that. I was in a couple plants yesterday, and exactly what you're saying. Like I'm a small piece of their puzzle when I'm working with them, when they're our client, we have a partnership. But I just see like the amount of packagers running in and out. They're excavating a parking lot the other day to put in some new equipment. The number of people and things that are happening at a plant is astounding. And so I don't know if I envy the role of a plant manager or an owner of a food and beverage company, because I respect the fact they got a lot going on. And that's part of the solution we want to offer. Not a lot, but some of these environmental reportings, it can be a pain. And so that's why they want to reach out to companies like Enviro-Stewards, CarbonOne, and ourselves, because if they have to report it, they just want to make it easy. And that can be done with the newest level of technology, metering and software. That's one less task you have to give to someone. And then as far as the barriers are concerned, I think our biggest barrier is the education piece. The technology we use and the software we use, and now this really cool stuff with AI, how we're able to analyze all this data, it's all very new. And if you're running a plant 20, 30, maybe even 80 years old, you're familiar with some levels of technology. Sometimes we get stuck in the past working with old technology and rely on it. Our biggest barriers is that education piece to bring it into the boardroom and say, look, this technology has only been developed in the last 5 or 10 years. It's extremely powerful and it'll make you guys money within 6 months. And naturally, everyone's very apprehensive about that. And that is our barrier. We're trying to convince people and show them with many case studies just how powerful it is. But once we get past that barrier and we make a partnership, it's really exciting to see the team get super engaged. And that's actually kind of one of the externalities we find, or one of these unique benefits that we didn't even consider, and that is employee engagement, where we put this new technology in their hands. They're able to see a production line a way they've never been able to see it before. An operator, someone who's new right out of high school, or someone who's been there for 30 years, they can manipulate that ball valve and they can immediately see how they're making an impact at their company. They go home that day knowing that, hey, I saved a significant amount of water at this particular facility and I did it and I could see it. Once we see that engagement, the next projects that rolled out are much quicker. But yeah, just to reiterate and answer your question, that initial barrier is just to get the word out that there has been a massive leap forward in technology and it's very doable now.
Great. Yeah. What do you think, Matt? In terms of barriers.
Yeah, I would echo that. Maybe to what you mentioned earlier, Tyson, the biggest demand is on people's time in the factory. And one anecdote from a client that we worked with, their maintenance manager, who has so many things to take care of, was still going around every day to take the water meter readings. And that's such a poor use of their valuable time. Having a sensor on there, they were eager to get those meters installed and then move on to get even more visibility into the rest of the plant. Up to the level of senior management who have to do the reporting of the greenhouse gas emissions when they're not having to fill in numbers in the spreadsheet and chase people down for utility bills and copy them over manually, which is also error prone. Having that be automated just makes a huge impact on their day-to-day so they can focus on important things. And when it comes to implementation of opportunities, kind of to your point, this might be seen as one more project. And with the experience that we all have going into various different types of facilities, we can help move these projects forward. So where a team might not have the engineering capacity because they're focused on production, we can provide that extra extension of their team to keep moving projects forward, get quotes from vendors, do the engineering design, support contractors with kind of what's the next step, so that it doesn't have to fall on the plant staff to do that work themselves. We can really be a partner and realize the gains that they're hoping to achieve.
And Brett, your solution is a little bit different in terms of what you can support food companies with. What do you sometimes find is a barrier to adopting your solution?
Yeah, so I would definitely echo Dave's and Matt's comments there, and I would double down on the time barrier, the resources, and the fact that it's the priority level, right? And I think what that stems back to is the failure to align with business objectives, right? Because when we can show the business value, it raises the priority level and allows us to get those time in those resources. But a big thing that we come across, Tyson, is data, right? In today's world, data is king. And in our world of climate and carbon, there really is this myth out there still that in order to get into your scope 3, your value chain, your supply chain stuff, that you need to engage directly with your suppliers, which can become a huge lift, and you need to get your suppliers on board. And if you're not a large organization with a big stick, that can become very difficult. But with the new technology platforms that are out there, like ours, You really don't need to do that, right? In our platform, for example, we have got all the data that you need to do your scope 3 today without having to touch your supply chain, right? And in terms of being able to start addressing and reducing the emissions, from your supply chain and your scope 3 emissions, again, companies think that they need to engage with their supply chain to do that. And of course, over time, you're going to need to do that. But today, you can start immediately, right? The biggest piece of a food and beverages company's carbon footprint is what's known as scope 3 category 1. So that's purchased goods and services. So your ingredients and your packaging materials are the largest portion by an order of magnitude of your emissions. So if you're going to focus on, where the opportunity is, that's where you want to look. And you don't need to engage your supply chain to start. An amazing way, a very powerful way to start reducing your scope 3 emissions is to start looking at food loss and waste, right? Because the more that you can reduce your food loss and waste internally, the less ingredients you're going to be buying, right? So that's going to really start to reduce your scope 3 category 1 emissions. And of course, you're going to realize cost savings there as well. And I'm sure Mats and Dave will chat a little bit about that food loss and waste piece there as well.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And I guess that really builds to what we want to talk about next, which is, I had the pleasure of working with some of you in a pilot we did. Usually CFIN's funding programs are national in scope, but occasionally we have an opportunity to do a regional type of opportunity. And we were able to partner with a COA last year and do a pilot project called Greening Your Food Operations. So we had a number of projects that I know Quantify and Enviro-Stewards helped some food manufacturers with. Whether it's an example from that or an example of another company you've worked with, can you tell us a little bit about the actual success stories of what you're finding when you're able to get in there and work with companies and share a little bit more with the group on that? Dave?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I'll share some examples from out east, but I do want to share an example that happened about 4 days ago. It's of the same vein of what we do. So for all of you out there in webinar land that are listening to us now, I've been in your position. Sometimes I just listen to it in the background, but I encourage you to open up the screen and take a look at our screens now, because I know people are going to be sharing some imagery, which really, picture tells 1,000 words. So I'm going to share this. A bit of a risk, this is a live dashboard, so there's always the risk of it not working real time, but can everyone see that now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is a live dashboard at a food and beverage manufacturer. This is a good example just to see what, interface you have with your facility. This is the production line. What I'm going to show you here is something that actually happened during one of those ACOA projects as well. But like I say, this just happened in the last 48 hours. So what we're seeing here is live water use on a production line. And you can see, back in January all the way up until last week, their average water use was about 2 to 5 liters per minute. As we can see on July 4th, it spiked right up to 30. So that is the whole point of this technology and how it plays into your sustainability piece. If you can see exactly how much water you're using, not just plant-wide, but on specific lines, not only are you able to catch malfunctions and losses of water, but you're able to be more sustainable with your water. And there's actually quite many embedded sort of issues with this particular opportunity. So, first and foremost, the plant manager was alerted on the dashboard, hey, your water's gone up 10x from 3 to 30 liters per minute. So immediately went over to that area. It ended up being a failed condensate pump, which puts load on the boiler, which causes more natural gas burn on your boiler. And then in this case, this extra cooling water. So a huge natural gas, or what Brett was talking about, a scope 1 win, where we're immediately reducing the unnecessary burn of natural gas. And then with that, technically a scope 2 win as well, because of course there's energy embedded in moving water, and then ultimately a water win. So over a month, this is a $6,500 win. So I'll stop sharing there. And I can jump over to kind of those ACOA projects that we were talking about. So we're at 3 different food and beverage manufacturing facilities. Everything I showed you on the water example there, we found the exact same thing on the energy side at a major dairy in PEI. So this is quite typical for a lot of food and beverage manufacturers, like we talked about earlier. You know, there's a lot of things to manage. Just picture your house. You know, you're trying to manage your house, but instead of 1 garden hose, you have 100 garden hoses. But here's the rub. You're 1 plant manager for a plant, you're 1 house manager for a house. So you have 1 person who's trying to manage all those end users. It's basically impossible to keep your eye on everything. So at this particular dairy, up on a mezzanine lost in the back of the factory, they had this pretty large nitrogen generator that was meant to run when nitrogen was needed for packaging. We put a CT clamp, a real-time visibility meter on that machine. And by the time we finished that install and 2 weeks later, we now had 2 weeks of live data. That machine that should have been running on demand was running full out all the time, pulling amperage that whole time. In PEI, the grid is not as clean as it is in Ontario. So you can imagine those scope 2 GHG emissions was even higher. But the graph looked almost exactly what I showed you there, although it was, you know, steady all the time, 30 amps drawing. So that immediately flagged an opportunity. They could put some controls in, turn off that machine, get alerted when it's on again. And that one particular opportunity with a project that had about 15 metering points, you know, that paid for about 20% of the project, the savings on that. And the solution was no cost. You know, they just changed the set point, so it turned off when it wasn't needed.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's great, Dave. It's just so practical, and it seems so easy once you actually have that information and that data at your fingertips. But otherwise, like you say, it would go on and be wasted. Mats, would you like to share a little bit too about some of your experiences?
Yeah, I can't understate kind of Brett's comment enough about the impactfulness of reducing product loss in facilities. We worked with a large brewer in New Brunswick through the CFIN program, and there was quite a bit of ingredients that was being hauled off after the production process, and normally that would have been considered waste and no thought is given to it. There's some cost associated with hauling, but it's nowhere near the cost of all the ingredients, time and energy that has gone into processing that product. And we found an opportunity to actually recover enough beer that would equal 3% of the facility's total production. And so when you talk about the embedded emissions and the embedded utilities that have gone into that beer, recovering that 3 additional percent has a huge impact on greenhouse gas emissions. And that goes straight to profit because you've already done all the work to process that beer. So that was a really impactful opportunity. We worked with a smaller meat manufacturer in Nova Scotia through the program. And similar to Dave, what he was sharing, how savings often kind of trigger other savings when you look at the root cause. We're really excited to see that that company had already implemented a hydronic loop to recover waste heat that normally would only be found in kind of state-of-the-art new build facilities. They had kind of MacGyvered this solution themselves and were already recovering waste heat from some of their compressors to use for preheating hot water. And we were able to find greater efficiency in how they were operating that system with the minute-by-minute data that you wouldn't be able to just intuitively know. You really have to look into the data that we're collecting on site to then find another 8% savings on that opportunity. Or on-demand water heating, instead of needing to continuously flow hot water around the facility to have it be ready on demand, having an electric hot water heater be available on demand significantly reduced both the water consumption and all the natural gas that went into heating that water in the first place. So a lot of these opportunities kind of escalate where you're saving in multiple areas at the same time.
Great, thanks, Matt. Do you want to add anything to that, Brad?
Yeah, I just, I would add that, Dave and Mats are talking about, visibility, right? And I think visibility is critical. You need to be able to see stuff, right? To be able to identify opportunities. And what we see, we actually did work with a small hard cider company through the ECOA project there out in PEI. And we were able to, just with our data and our platform, get them up to speed really quickly on doing a product carbon footprint, which helped drive sales through conversations with consumers. But the other thing that we were able to do in looking at their scope 2 emissions, scope 1 and 2 emissions, is when you look at things from a carbon perspective or through the carbon lens, you're looking at things a little bit differently. And what it does is it helps you to uncover opportunities that maybe you were as they say, nose blind to on that one commercial, but maybe blind to previously, right? So what we're finding is that coming at things from the angle of carbon and carbon measurement really does provide that that new lens to provide greater visibility and allow you to see and uncover those opportunities. And the other thing that I would add here is that there's a lot of, I think, case studies and discussion around the larger companies, right, and the big companies that are really doing this stuff. But it really does apply to the small companies and the medium-sized companies as well, right? Because let's face it, here in Canada, a majority of the food and beverage companies are small to medium-sized companies, right? So, there's huge opportunities and huge wins regardless of the size of your company.
Yeah,
Tyson, if I could just add to that, because
yes.
Brett's brought up two points there that perfectly speak to another case study we have here, and that is, small to medium-sized companies, small to medium-sized project, returned a lot of value, but also looking at it from the perspective of data and GHG emissions. So again, I'm going to share a screen really briefly just to kind of speak to this. But what we have here is an air compressor project where we put a very affordable meter on this. We're talking about $1,500 to get this thing up and running. You can now see it real time. And we started talking to the team, what are the KPIs you want to see? So exactly what Brett was talking about, visibility of data of in this case, GHG emissions. So in the bottom right here, the green is what they have saved since the opportunity was implemented. So to kind of get you through this is the, you're now familiar with the view of the dashboard. This is our compressor in question. Before we arrived, this is how the compressor was running, full out all the time. This was over Christmas break, pulling 40 amps. It was just running in the background. So, getting this meter in place within a day, we're now getting this real-time data, and a project showed itself. How can we be more sustainable and how can we be more financially competitive with just this one machine in this one small company? And we suggested, well, how about a low cost, no cost solution of just turning that compressor off when you don't need it? So on the evenings and weekends. So you can clearly see here that the data prove that they started doing that. Now they can see their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday production where they actually need that air and it's turned off. So we chose this as our starting date. And this is what we've now saved. So in just this 4 months, we're tallying it. It's adding up every single day. They've saved nearly 2,000 hours of run hours. The maintenance guys love that. They come to me and say, I don't have to fix this machine as often. That's a huge money savings. Saved a lot of electricity. But again, back to Brett's point and kind of everything we're talking about, when you roll it up to GHG emissions on an Ontario grid, this is calculating how many emissions they've saved. And this is great for a case study for the company, or if you have to report your GHG emissions. We've saved them nearly 2.5 tons just on the electricity of one air compressor. And again, if we were to take this air compressor opportunity and bring it over to Nova Scotia or PEI, where the grid is a little more carbon intensive, that would probably be 3-4x emissions saved.
I would just add there as well, great backup evidence for Bill C-59, right? So if you want to start talking about this stuff, you need the data to back it up, and what better data than that right there.
Awesome. Maybe one last question before we see if we have any other questions from participants. I mean, at CFIN, we're all about technology. We're about the development of technology for the food industry, and obviously then the adoption of it, whether that's in food manufacturing, restaurant, retail, etc. You guys have all commented on different technologies you're using now. I'm wondering, maybe a little bit of a different question. how do you see new opportunities emerging with technology in your field? Is it AI, et cetera, or things that are some new tools in your tool chest that you think you'll be able to benefit from moving forward?
Maybe start with this one. I think kind of what we've spoken about with Internet of Things and smart sensors that you can install permanently has been a game changer to let this be a long-term engagement with clients, to continue to support them with project management and tracking the savings of opportunities, alerting when things kind of get out of line again, and that there's a good moment to intervene with an air compressor or water leaks. So the Internet of Things kind of technology has made that much better for clients to have that long-term engagement rather than just a one-time snapshot through an assessment. So that's been a big improvement for a lot of facilities. Kind of the second thing that comes to mind here is the integration of some of these platforms, where in the past companies would have had to use all the different platforms of various vendors that supply the sensors. The platform that we've developed ties all those sensors into one place, and our partnership together with CarbonOne to integrate both carbon accounting, which gives you the high-level snapshot and know where you're going to have the biggest impact, with the minute-by-minute monitoring that lets you actually make operational changes and find saving opportunities. That kind of integration is innovative. It's not out there yet, and that's where we really see kind of advancements that will help support industry make impacts both on the GHG emission reduction and cost savings.
Interesting. Thanks, Matt. Right. Anyone else want to jump in, or?
Yeah, I can. The march of technology is amazing to watch, and when we go into these plants, especially these historical plants, and we're going in, we're seeing analog technology that's basically come out of Soviet Russia, and plants are still working on them. It's amazing to see they're actually in place. And like Matt says, once you get into this world of digitizing this metering, and then connecting it to the Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, you're now able to see it. And now you're getting these reams of endless data. All of that is fantastic, and it's great technology that's giving us new and unprecedented visibility on how we operate our plants and make them more sustainable and competitive. Although I should mention, there is a caveat to that, and it's this being overwhelmed by data. And so up until, I would even hazard, 2 or 3 years ago, that was an issue. If you were a plant that saw the light, started putting in new metering technology and digitized it, that's great. But now you have many reams of data that you now have to go through manually. And so again, this march of technology, and what's so exciting about it in the last 2 or 3 years now with AI coming out, once we start layering that on top of everything else we've built, people are making the argument now we're going from Industry 4.0, which has only been around for 10 or 20 years, and we're already jumping into Industry 5.0. And that's where you're adding on this AI element. And that's where things get really powerful and exciting. We have basic alerts programmed within our clients where things we've learned, we now put alert on. Okay, this motor's running too often. This water supply is now running and it shouldn't be. Those are great. But now we're developing AI on top of that, where you basically have a 24/7 staff, plant manager assistant, who's monitoring all of this and is now interacting with you, prompting the conversation and saying, hey, did you know your air compressor is running 10% more than it was last week? We should probably look into that together. And that whole AI level to analyze that data is really powerful, because even now with our clients, like, we're pushing for the monthly meetings saying, hey, we saw something last night, we want to talk to you about it. But if we can have that AI partner with us doing that at the same time, the implementation rates are so much higher and the revenue back is so much higher.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. I think we'll jump in. Lavina, if you'd like to join us.
Sure. Yeah, we've got a few questions here for our panelists.
Okay.
I think that we've had some great discussion around data, and it's been mentioned quite a bit. So the question is, how can sustainability data be used to strengthen relationships with a retailer or another customer, or even, as mentioned earlier, an investor?
Happy to start this one off. I think particularly on the climate side, the retailers have strong public commitments to net zero of their own. And when you look at the retailers, the overwhelming majority of their footprint comes from Scope 3, Category 1, which for them is all of the products that they purchase and sell through their stores. So if you look at Loblaws, for example, 97% of Loblaws footprint is Scope 3 Category 1, so all of the products that they're buying and selling through their stores. So right now, what the retailers are doing is they're using estimation approaches for Scope 3, which is called spend-based, to get a rough estimate of emissions. But where they really need to go is they need to go to more granular supplier-specific data, right? So what they, ideally will need over time are the product carbon footprints of all of the products that they're selling through their stores. That gives them a much higher level of accuracy on their Scope 3 emissions. And typically what we see is the higher level of accuracy, the lower the level of emissions, because it represents what's actually happening today. So, being able to provide that data to the retailers, really helps them and their efforts, particularly on this, Scope 3, carbon stuff, and allowing them to achieve their objectives. So what I always encourage companies to do when they're talking with or they're pitching to the retailers is show how they can support their climate objectives or their sustainability objectives specific to their category, right? Whether that be snacks, produce, meats, dairy, whatever it may be. I think that would, resonates to the retailers.
Great. Maybe we can jump in, maybe one more quick question, Lavina?
Sure. Yeah, there was a question that came in around the topic of AI. So it sounds like there's potential benefits of leveraging AI when it comes to sustainability. How should, firms think about, the benefits of using AI versus the environmental impact of AI itself?
Good question.
Yeah, we're pretty heavy into this stuff. So there's a really good infographic that kind of shows that, and it puts it into kind of real terms. So if we were to think of just, one person writing a report, I used to do that. I used to write a lot of reports. It would take me 2 to 3 weeks, a lot of time on the computer, a lot of energy to produce that. And so if you were to just match up the amount of energy that one person would need to create a report over a 2 to 3 week period versus AI producing it in about 30 to 35 seconds, the computing power to produce it in that short amount of time is high. But if you were to compare that to the amount of time a human would take it, the actual energy inputs are a lot lower. So of course we have to consider, are we actually ahead in this GHG and climate game by using new technology? Typically the answer is yes. We see it in a plant. A different example is you're going from a non-VFD to a VFD motor. You're investing in new technology, and as a result, you're using less electricity. So always has to be keep top of mind of, are you actually carbon negative on this particular avenue of what you're deciding to do? And then I don't think I need to speak anymore about the benefits of AI and the power it can do to your team to enhance all these sort of things.
Great, thank you.
Great, awesome. We are getting close to wrapping up, I guess, for the hour. So I think we'll cut off the conversation there. Thank you, Lavina. And I just wanted to thank everyone. Thank you, Lavina, for helping with the Q&A. Thank you very much for Brett and Mats and Dave for joining us today. I've had a chance to have a few conversations with you in the past, and I always learn new things and the latest developments and the latest technologies, and it's great to see the work that you're doing. I also know that if you're a company that's looking at pursuing work in this area, certainly you can reach out to our 3 panelists today as well. We have other people as regional innovation directors in our own regions that have some expertise in this area as well. So please feel free to reach out to us at CFIN, and we can connect you with some leads if you're looking at pursuing work in this area. In terms of, before we wrap up, I just wanted to go over a few future webinars that we're going to be hosting in the next little bit. So a reminder, actually, before we talk webinars, currently we have our Food Tech Frontier 25 application opportunity to be considered one of the top 25 breakthrough food innovators across the country. Those applications close this evening at midnight. So if you have an application that you're working on, please remember to complete it and press submit. Secondly, in terms of webinars, on the 16th of July at 12 Eastern, we have an information session on our Food Tech Ontario program. So if you're interested in that, please join us. On the 25th, Jamil is hosting our Yodel 101 Beginner's Guide to Using Our Platform at 12 o'clock Eastern. So another opportunity. And Lavina, you're hosting a webinar in September on working with Canadian R&D centers. That will be quite interesting as well. So another one to look forward to in the next little bit. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I think we'll wrap things up and have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.